Hello, everyone. This is Eric, and this is the Rewind Project. We are dipping back into 1998 for this first little mini-season 25 years ago. And one of the stories that came out of 1998 is just a really sad one. I mean, there's no way to make any jokes about this one, but this was the year that Matthew Shepard died.
It's funny because as I've said ad nauseum, I was in college during this time, and I remember it, but it didn't really have like the effect on it that I think obviously for a lot of other people, but also I feel like as an adult, you read about it and you're like, it's like there's nothing. It's awful. It's awful. And we're still dealing with this kind of like these hate crimes today in 2023.
Yeah. I had just come out of the closet when Matthew Shepard died. And my family actually had like a much bigger reaction. Like for them, it was just like, it really was their kid, and for me, I was just like, I live in DC. This was Wyoming. Like I was in a little bit of denial about, I'm in this liberal place. Like this isn't going to happen to me. Well, this kind of stuff can happen anywhere. It probably is more likely in a very conservative place, which is why I've always chosen to live in more liberal environs. But yeah, this is just a really sad story.
This is the danger and like the perfect example of why vilifying people's lifestyles and points of view and separating each other is so dangerous, because it dehumanizes that other person and it makes it very easy to treat them as if they're not human. I can't understand the thought process of somebody just strapping another human being to a fence and leaving them there to die. That does not make
after beating them, nearly to death. I mean, and sadly, I saw some of the photos, and I wish I hadn't, because it's haunting. I can never unsee some of that stuff. But for those who are not familiar, in October 1998, Matthew Shepard accepted a ride home from two guys that he met at a bar. Their names were Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson. I'm always struck by the fact that we always remember the names of the victims, and we never remember the names of the awful people who actually perpetrate these crimes. These two men robbed Shepard, so it seems like their main motivation was just to take all of his money. Again, they don't care about him as a human being, but it's thought, here's this little gay kid that we can just rob blind. But they beat him, including fatal blows to the skull with the butt of a pistol.
I mean, that's pistol whipping, basically.
To a fence. Yes.
Yeah.
Tied him to a fence and left him there. He would actually live for another 5 days. He stayed there overnight. Someone found him the next day. 5 days later, he would die from his injuries. Of course, by then, this was already, a national news story. It took another 13 years before Barack Obama signed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act into law. Of course, James Byrd was the man, a black man, who was dragged by chains from the back of a pickup truck in the South by a couple of white men who, again, didn't see him as a human being. I mean, it's just, usually our cold opens kind of, we end with a big joke and we end with a big laugh. There's nothing to laugh at here. But I do think it's important sometimes that we just look back and say, wow, 25 years ago, what, if anything, have we learned? Why is it important to remember this stuff? And I think for both Matthew Shepard and James Byrd, we can't forget that this kind of stuff happens, and sadly still happens. I mean, this happens all the time. Life for trans women of color in this country is, this kind of fear 24/7 all day, every day.
Yeah. Well, and I can't help but, compare the parallels to, Tyree Nichols, which has been in the news for quite some time. So, just, these sorts of insane hate crimes, whether it's, no matter what color you are, no matter, it just, these senseless deaths.
So, yeah, Matthew Shepard, R.I.P.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Welcome back to the Rewind Project. We're moving forward into our 1998 portion of the season. Today we're going to be talking about Gods and Monsters, a movie that I personally love. I have a feeling we're going to have some spicy takes from some other members of the panel.
I don't know about spicy per se, but definitely thoughts with a capital T. This is my first time watching this movie, and perhaps there is a reason that I didn't watch it in 1998.
Well, I remember in 1998, again, as I said during the cold open, I was pretty newly out of the closet. And so this was, it was a big gay movie and, a big Oscar nominated gay movie. And so people were taking it seriously. And I was so excited to see it. Watching it again, I remembered watching it the first time and some of the things that I liked and some of the things that freaked me out a little bit as a young man. And I have a very different take on it now. So that's interesting.
Here's a question for you all. Was Ian McKellen out of the closet when he made this movie?
Yes.
He was. Okay.
And I don't remember. I meant to look up when he came out, but he was definitely an out actor. Cool. Anyway, that's a long rabbit hole we won't go down. But I do think that it hurt Ian McKellen in terms of all of his awards chances because a lot of people just thought, well, he's not really acting because he already is, that thing that everyone else would have to be so brave to do.
Well, so on that, let's get into it. So Gods and Monsters is a screenplay by Bill Condon, based on a novel by Christopher Bram and directed by Bill Condon.
I love Bill Condon. I love Chicago. I love Dreamgirls. I love his whole oomph, if you will. I literally the soundtrack from Dreamgirls, the movie. I mean, obviously the show, the original Broadway cast is great too, but I listened to that movie soundtrack of Dreamgirls, I don't know, ad nauseum. It's everybody in that movie is so talented. I know this is not a Dreamgirls podcast, but maybe one day.
Well, which is kind of interesting because James Wales, the titular character, actually directed Showboat.
Yes, which I love Showboat. Yeah. I know that a lot of people think it's too long and it's blood and it's whatever. I saw it in London. It was like a 3-hour version. It was that 3-hour version. And actually in 1998, because I was there when I saw it when I was studying abroad. And I fucking love Showboat. Fucking love Showboat. Love it. Love it.
Because only a gay man should really direct musicals. Just gonna say.
Right, of
course. Notable achievements for this movie: 1999 Oscars winner, Best Writing, screenplay on a material previously produced or published. So that was for Bill Condon. Nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role, Ian McKellen. Nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Lynn Redgrave.
Totally should have won.
Queen.
Totally should have won.
She was the best part of the movie, bar none.
1999 Golden Globes, winner, Best Performance by an Actress in Supporting Role in a Motion Picture for Lynn Redgrave. Nominee, Best Motion Picture Drama. Nominee, Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture Drama, Ian McKellen. Crap ton more of accolades if you look at it from all these other smaller organizations. GLAAD Media Awards, winner, Outstanding Film, Wide Release. So obviously, it was talking about a gay character. So the plot, this movie focuses on the last few weeks of director James Whale's life as he deals with a loss in mental stability after a stroke and befriends a new handsome landscaper.
So here's a question, and I did not do
that long line.
The research. I didn't do the research on this, but did James Whale commit suicide in his swimming pool? He did. Okay.
He did.
Yeah, that was sad. That's always
because he had continuing strokes, and he was basically what they were portraying here is actually what happened. So
I have to say that it was, as much as I sometimes resist the I'm a gay man and I suffer kind of trope. I liked this in that he didn't suffer from being gay. at all.
No, I love that.
He was a man who happened to be gay, and he was totally okay with it. He was suffering because he was getting older. He didn't like getting older. He didn't like his youth slipping away. He didn't like feeling like a dirty old man when he looked at a beautiful young man. And he really didn't like all of the medication that he had to be on in order to have any semblance of a life after having all these strokes. Weirdly, it reminded me of this thing that happened a month or so ago. Did you guys get all caught up in the stuff about The Last of Us, the HBO zombie show?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay. Have you seen it?
The episode 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That everyone is talking about because Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, quasi spoilers, sorry, are in one episode of this show. That's it. They never come back after episode 3. But there's this lovely kind of love story between the two of them. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, they suffer greatly, mostly because of a zombie apocalypse, but they don't suffer because they're gay. And I was just like, thank God, that we don't have, and really it was kind of, this movie then was like, 25 years ago, but a little bit ahead of its time because James Whale was not having the best couple weeks of his life, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm gay and everyone's mean to me, or, oh, I'm gay and therefore I hate myself. Like, it was none of that, even though his housekeeper was kind of a bitch about it. But I mean, he didn't care, which is great.
That's what I love. There's a lot that I did not enjoy about this movie, but I did love, and it really did resonate with me watching it, that he was totally unapologetic about who he was and just like, I'm a homosexual. I like men. These are the stories that I have where, I had to be a little bit more cagey about it, but now I, don't give a shit and I can just sort of be who I am. And I did like that. And I did like Ian McKellen's portrayal of that a lot. And that was probably for me the best part of the movie, aside from Hannah.
Well, and apparently I did some internet research, and he actually was out, like in 1920s and 30s as he was directing.
That's amazing.
He was an out gay man, and so that portrayal when they did the backflashes to like when he was directing Bride of Frankenstein and stuff. I mean, we don't know that was necessarily the conversation that happened, but he actually was like that on set. He didn't care that people knew that he was gay. He acted on that lifestyle. And back then, because you didn't have the paparazzi, because it didn't really get out past the production, it wasn't public knowledge, nobody cared.
Well,
but,
also back then, nobody cared about directors. They really didn't. Like, directors were not celebrities in the way that they are now. I mean, if somebody had, a paparazzi photo of Steven Spielberg canoodling with a hot young guy in a bar, it would be on every tabloid, and that would be, not suggesting anything about Steven Spielberg, Kate Capshaw, and calm down.
Allegedly.
But, it does kind of say a couple things, right? I mean, that it does matter about your environment, right? In 1920s and 30s Hollywood, nobody cared. Everybody knew that George Cukor was hanging out with what did he call them? The boys at the the dinette shop or whatever.
Yeah.
They knew that Rock Hudson was having naked boys only pool parties at his house. Everyone knew all this stuff, and nobody really cared. And again, they wanted to keep it out of the papers because society outside of Hollywood certainly cared. But as long as you didn't, weren't exposed and it wasn't a scandal, no one gave a shit.
Right.
And it does kind of say that, yes, I mean, it's cool that James Whale was out, but he also wasn't like any braver, Matt, than you and I are, because we live in 2023 America where nobody really cares, and so... Yeah. We're out, and it's not like we don't deserve a big gold star for it, and kind of neither does he, although now he's living in 1950s America, and he's just a private citizen, and people like Clay and the girl at the bar and, other people are going to not like it at all.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. I still found that, like, the fact that he had an out lifestyle in 1920s and 30s, to me, I think a lot of other people probably would have been closeted, and he didn't seem too closeted. I mean, to shy away from telling people at all. So at least from the little that I did read.
I also read into his performance a little bit that he was an old man and didn't give a shit. Like, it was one of those things that if he were, clearly
wait.
if he were still trying to be a big player in Hollywood, he might have been a little bit more cagey about it. But he was just like, I'm old. I paid my dues. No one's going to take my house from me. I like dick. Whatever.
So let's get into that then. Let's just start talking about performances. Ian McKellen as the titular character, James Whale.
You really like saying titular today. That's something
I do like saying titular.
Titular. As the only one with actual tits here.
It feels like you're saying away with something naughty.
He's not really titular unless he's a god or a monster. So
I mean, and we could get into that. True. He could be both.
We can get sure. I mean, what are you saying, Matt?
We're all gods and monsters at certain points in our lives. I just made that up. I mean, Ian McKellen is great. I don't subscribe to the he was acting like himself, but he was kind of acting like himself a little bit. But I mean, just straight up Ian McKellen just acting, he could stand up and read the phone book and I would be charmed.
He is a witty gay man in real life. Right. And so that whole, I'm sure he didn't suffer too greatly from figuring out how he was going to say, work, right? What was his line that just made me howl when they said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Nothing serious. Touch of stroke." I mean, that was just so and Ian McKellen would probably say that in life. Correct. I mean, that is, the personality of James Whale might not have been very far away, but I don't think Ian McKellen was haunted by his memories of World War I, certainly, and nor all the other things that he had to kind of invest this character with. He was brilliant. I mean, he was terrific. There was so much about his performance that was amazing. I think I kind of see where Ali is coming from. It's just, does every movie that centers on an older man have to be, all of my traumatic memories and how I still, I mean, it's cool that it wasn't about him being gay, but it really was about him facing his mortality and kind of reaching the end of his life. And I feel like I've seen that movie a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I just read a book that one of the tropes was that the guy was in World War II and met a guy and nobody knew he was gay. And then I watched this movie literally a week later and I was like, okay, everyone, with the wars and the whatnot. So perhaps I'm just a little burnt out on that kind of trope. But I'm sure that I know there's a lot of gay people in the armed services, but it just was funny because I had two back-to-back, things with that in the forefront.
Well, I think also too it's the story. I mean, it's the story of him facing his mortality kind of alone. I mean, he's got a housekeeper who is family kind of friend. He's got an ex-lover, and apparently they actually were lovers. That is, their ashes are sitting together now, and because David died several years later, he released the suicide note to people, and then when he died, the biographer for James and he was the executor of David's will, and David wanted his ashes with James.
He was such a jerk in the movie, though. Ugh. Well, I mean, I know we're gonna get to him, but
we'll get there.
We'll get there.
So so maybe that was part of this too, as he's looking. I don't know if he's looking for a friend at the end of the universe or what, but it's at the end of the world. Yeah. So I think that might be why all these memories are starting to flood back in the movie. And because they all deal with either family that he no longer has any connection with, or they deal with, people that he had past relationships with, and loved. So I kind of get a sense of that too as we watch the movie.
Yeah, I had a hard time kind of figuring out where James Whale's heart was, because he does have this relationship with a man who he describes as an ex-husband, and who they only really split up because Hollywood got in the way. If neither of them were working, I think they just would have lived together and he would have been fine. But he also seemed to be really still carrying a torch for this guy in World War I.
Yes. I think maybe that is one true love.
I think so. I mean, I kind of get this idea, and maybe it's only his one true love because he died young and he never had to live with him and figure out that he had skid marks and left the seat up and all the other annoying shit that you have to deal with when you actually have a relationship.
Well, it might have also been his first love. You know what I mean? You have infatuations, but this might have been the first love that returned that love. We don't know the extent of their relationship before it really happened, before the kid died.
Sure. So, but I mean, it's definitely an idealized kind of look back, at this person who I don't think he really got to know him as a person, but I think he was
just in the biblical sense.
War, infatuated, all the things were happening to make this guy this perfect idealized man. Mm-hmm. And they cast him really well too, because he just looked so fresh scrubbed and all American and cute as hell.
Well, British. But yes, but very apple cheeked.
The actor was American, but yes.
Yeah. Yes.
He didn't say a word, so he could have been anybody. I mean, he could have been.
Maybe he could. Maybe he didn't speak at all. Who knows? Who could be whatever. But yes, very much like a idealized sort of first love. They just happen to be in the trenches, literally.
Yeah. So I think overall, I was enamored with Ian McKellen's performance. I did see tidbits of Gandalf in there that later on, but I think overall, I mean, I was mesmerized most of the time when he was on screen, by the character, the way he acted. I mean, I guess that is the old gay man that I esteem to be when I get older. That is, still has his wits about him. And doesn't give a fuck anymore.
And flirts with the yard man because he can, right?
Because he can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to flirt with the yard man when I'm that age. Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Though it was interesting, though. I didn't expect him to commit suicide. I thought that he was going to ask Brendan Fraser to kill him. Give him a cocktail or pills or, whatever. Because he was asking about mercy killing. And I was like, oh, okay. Thinly veiled. I knew what he was talking about.
So that was, I mean, we can talk about it now. That was one of my thoughts for the movie after I got to the end, watching it the second time. I wonder if that was actually James's, according to the movie, his motivation the entire time. He recognized.
I absolutely think so.
Yeah. Was to try and force this guy who he thought was a big old Marine to kill him by offending him by sexually assaulting him.
I mean, it's not, maybe their very first meeting, I think he was just like, oh, you're attractive, but when he's sitting for him the first time and he goes on and on and on about bare buttocks and pricks everywhere and da-da-da, I'm like, okay, you're laying it on a bit thick. It's one thing, to be an out gay man. That's wonderful. I support that. But let's not, I mean, he was clearly trying to get a rise out of Brendan Fraser, and it totally worked.
Right.
Although Brendan Fraser is, not a violent person, so he didn't punch him. He just, hit a piece of furniture and then stormed out. But yeah, I mean, when looking back on it, I mean, I didn't get that during that scene, but it was one of those things that after the movie was over, I was like, oh, you've been trying to get a rise out of him for weeks now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's been plotting this, and he's been testing the waters just to see. And I think because when he first sees him, he comments on the tattoo. I think he recognized the tattoo, and I think he thought, okay, well, this might lead to where I need it to go.
Because he thought he was a hardened war vet who might be suffering from PTSD and might go off. He didn't realize that the kid's appendix burst right after he got the tattoo. Yeah. But also, that saying, death before dishonor is kind of a comment on a lot of, he didn't want to be this helpless old man who, had to eat everything through a straw. He'd rather die than be that person.
I mean, I'm there. Put me out to pasture. Put me out to misery. I'm not interested in doing any of that. No, thank you.
No, absolutely. I don't want to be. I don't want to be a huge burden to anybody. And I also, when my quality of life is over, I think this is such an awful thing to say, but I'm going to say it on the internet. we're more humane to our dogs than we are to our people sometimes, in the way that we insist on keeping people alive well past the point where they have any quality of life and they're happy at all.
Yeah.
And, I'm all about choice. And I think that there are some people who think that, choosing to end your life is just like, first of all, they're all caught up in their religion and they think it's a big sin. But they're just never prepared to make that choice. Let me tell you right now, anybody who's listening, I am prepared to make that choice. Like, I don't want to die tomorrow because I'm still having a great time. But when it's over for me, just put me out of my misery, please.
Yep. Kavork me all the way.
Yeah, seriously. Yep. Like, take me to Switzerland, give me a cocktail, and I'm good. Thanks. Yeah. But anyway, this is not End of Life podcast. So anyway.
It is now.
It is now. So I have an issue with... I know we're in the middle of a Brendan Renaissance, if you will. Brendan Fraser Renaissance, I think is what they're calling it. No, literally, like, that's what they're calling it. I had a problem. I just felt like I wish that they would have cast somebody with like a little bit more chemistry with Ian McKellen. Like, Brendan Fraser is a good actor. I've never been like a huge fan. I've also never seen The Mummy. Apparently I need to see The Mummy. I don't know.
It's a great fun flick.
But I don't know, like, because the whole what I thought the whole premise of the movie was that they were like friends, it's like two people who are like kind of different, but they become friends, like that kind of, normal thing that happens in Hollywood. But I just didn't feel like they really had any, like, I don't know. I felt like it was sort of desperate. I like, they didn't really have any like friend chemistry. I don't know. That bothered me. And it bored the fuck out of me. Thank you. I was so the second half of this movie, thank God it was under 2 hours. The second half of this movie, I was like, I am so bored.
I get what you're saying, Allie. I would actually blame the script more than the actors. I don't understand why Brendan Fraser came back. If he reacted that strongly to just a comment about a naked pool party, and he's that guy, which a lot of people were that guy in the 50s. Like, I blamed his environment as much as I blamed him. I didn't think he was evil, but I didn't get why he came back. I mean, nothing explained that to me. Like, what was it that made him come in the place and say, I want to sit for you? And what on earth prompted him to drop the towel at the end of the movie? Like, that's not who you are, and it's just, and yeah, you want to be kind to this person, but you don't have to show him your dick. There's a whole lot of ways that you can be kind to
There's a little bit in between.
Yeah, there are gradations there. So I didn't understand this character really at all. I mean, I think that the movie really painted a lovely portrait of James Whale. I don't think they were as interested in Clayton Boone, and I don't think that it was a evenly distributed movie, therefore, in terms of character development. So it is one of the flaws of the film that it still was there. I felt that way 25 years ago, and I remember that when I was watching it now, and I'm like, I don't get this guy. I don't know who he is.
I don't disagree with you on that. They could have fleshed out his character more. The reasoning that I took away from the film was that he didn't have a whole lot going on. He's hanging out at the bar with those people that are not his friends, can't keep a relationship going, has moved out to California to get away from his family for the most part, or at least his father. And so he's living by himself. So James is the only person that has shown him any kind of interest, like, in him as a person. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's true. I don't know that it's enough to build a relationship, but when you've got nothing else going on, you hang out with the person that at least seems to be interested in you as a person. And, so that's why that relationship started to develop.
But again, that's where I say, Bill Condon, give us a scene of Brendan Fraser sitting in his trailer with fucking nothing to do. And then, maybe like Frankenstein comes on TV and he's like, man, I probably shouldn't have, like, destroyed that guy's studio or whatever.
Right.
Something, but he just kind of shows up the next day and it was like, I'm back and I'm sorry. And I'm like, why? Why are you back? Like, not that it's impossible to come up with a reason, but that was all up to us as the audience to try to fill in that blank. And the script could have been stronger for Clayton. The script was incredibly strong for James Whale. By the way, I think it's interesting that, the Renaissance happened because Brendan Fraser started a movie called The Whale.
I know, which I still haven't seen yet. I don't know if I'm going to see it. I haven't seen it either. I don't know if I'm going to see it. I haven't seen it
either. I don't know that I need to see Brendan Fraser in a fat suit dressed up as a 600-pound man who, again, is another sad gay man who is 600 pounds. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, is he gay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
The sad gay man trope is, it's here, and I liked this movie. 25 years later, do we still need lonely, sad gay men? They exist. Look, lonely, sad gay men are out there, and they deserve to have movies made about them too. I didn't mean that, but I don't know.
It is a thing.
Well, this movie is more about him at the end of his life because of the quality of his life degrading, not because he's gay, but because of a stroke. So
yeah, and I think that The Whale is more about the fact that he's 600 pounds and everyone calls him The Whale.
Right, and he happens to be agoraphobic and doesn't leave his house,
Exactly. Yeah. But, he's a sad gay man.
I think overall, though, I did really enjoy Brendan's performance, even though we didn't get to see little Brendan.
A lot.
Oh, very nice. Very, very good shape.
He doesn't do anything
he's got
for
a
me.
Big head.
He's attractive, but he doesn't get the fires. The home fires burning for me. He never has. But I respect it, though. I respect it.
Is that the official take on our hotness correspondent?
That's the hottest correspondent. Look, he is a hot person, but for me personally, I don't. The flame is out. I don't know. Just didn't do anything for me. Also, he's kind of a jerk, and he was kind of a jerk. Betty wasn't so great. We'll talk about her in a second, but he's kind of a dick too.
Well, before, again, but that was the character, so it kind of redeemed himself at the end. But it is what it is. Next up is Lynn Redgrave as Hannah the housekeeper.
Loved her.
I was what a treat. Was not expecting this sort of brash Scandinavian performance in this movie, and it was a delight. It was so funny because I don't know, I'm very bad with accents, as I have said many times, both hearing and doing. Didn't know I thought she was German, didn't realize that she was Scandinavian, and the only reason I know she was Scandinavian is because the closed captioning told me so, that she was at one point to her daughter speaking Scandinavian. I don't know what language, but I was like, oh, okay. I thought she was German. And at one point I did hear her British accent when she's standing on the lawn, crying out, in the middle of the movie. I was like, there's that British accent, but I thought it was very good. She was just take no prisoners. And I love a take no prisoners housekeeper sort of character. So,
I am sorry, Mr. Jimmy, your movie is not my teacup was the best line in the whole thing.
I loved their relationship too. He was definitely the head of the house, but there was a kindness between the two of them. Even to that point where them watching the movie together at the end of the day. She spent most of her life with him, not with her family, so I thought was I loved that relationship between the two of them.
And her brand of homophobia was really interesting too. Clearly, she disapproved on religious grounds, but also I think she just out of the hospital and already chasing after boys. She knows absolutely who she lives with. And it's just I think she's maybe a bit of a prude and would be equally prudish if he were chasing after young women. Would have not approved of that either.
Right.
So yeah, it's really to me, she was such an interesting portrait of this is what religion kind of does to people, even if they have all the evidence in the world that this man is a human being and deserves respect. But poor thing, he will suffer the fires of hell. And she also was, I think the reason that we're all gravitating towards her, she was a much needed source of comedy in an otherwise pretty, dark piece of subject matter.
He is a, what is the word? A bugger. That is
Men bugger each other.
That whole kitchen scene was hilarious. Oh God. Yeah, I loved her character. She added the right amount of levity to the movie with her character.
Yeah, it was a real treat.
Should have won the Oscar. Still bitter about it.
Should have. So wait, who won the Oscar that year? For
do you want to pause? I'll look it up.
Stand by.
No, it was 1999. So that would have been what's her name for?
Was that Judi Dench?
Shakespeare in Love. It was Judi Dench for Shakespeare in Love for 5 fucking minutes on screen.
Okay, but this is what's problem. This is the problem with the Oscars, is that Judi Dench deserved an Oscar for playing Queen Victoria a couple years before, and everybody knew it. So everybody knew that the next time Judi Dench was going to get a nomination, that she was going to win. She didn't really win it for Shakespeare in Love, but I mean that's how voters are. It's like this is the whole problem with looking at the Oscars and saying this is actual an arbiter of quality. All those voters are very subjective. You know, same thing happened when Geraldine Page was nominated for her 8th Oscar for The Trip to Bountiful. Not a great movie. Hardly anyone saw it, but they all voted for her over Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple, who was brilliant and amazing. So everyone knew that Whoopi got, robbed. And so the next thing she gets nominated for, Ghost. Okay, Molly, you in Danger Girl. She was great. She was very funny. That was not an Oscar That was not an Oscar performance, And Annette Bening was nominated that year against Whoopi Goldberg. Should have won. Didn't win because Whoopi needed an Oscar, which Whoopi did need an Oscar, but she needed it 3 years ago. I mean, don't even get me started. It's so stupid. But yes, I will leave it there. Lynn deserved the Oscar, and we're done.
Absolutely.
I don't disagree.
It was a very hateful year at the Oscars. Next up, David Dukes as David Lewis, the seemingly romantic partner or ex-partner of James Wales.
That's an unfortunate name.
Yes. Well, the Nazi is Duke singular, so just make sure when you say this actor's name, you say David Dukes.
And I know that I'm sure the actor came before the white supremacist, but I don't know. Maybe I would have altered my name at some point.
I probably got a SAG card before David Duke singular became a household name. But yeah,
right.
I mean, I'm sure it's hard for his sister Daisy too. So I mean,
that was a real dad joke.
Okay,
real Matt's busting out the dad jokes. Woo! special episode.
So yeah, we've kind of already talked about David Lewis, but I mean, I was just fascinated by this whole, who is this guy? And, who is he to James, really? I mean, they had that kiss at the beginning that wasn't passionate, but it was very much like this is what an old married couple would do before saying goodbye. But he moved out, and he moved out apparently because he wants to work. And then he runs into him again at the tea party at George Cukor's house, and we find out that David was actually not the one that invited Ian McKellen there.
Right.
That David probably didn't want Ian McKellen to be there because he knew he was going to embarrass him in front of Elizabeth Taylor, as one does.
I mean, that was like a real blow to the heart for me, to find out that it was just this young guy who invited him just for sport versus actually getting a real invite, or finding out that it was your lover or your partner or whoever invited you. He took that way more in stride than I probably would have.
Well, I think he was disappointed, but what was he going to do? And he also knows that David has a point. I mean, we've already seen what Ian McKellen was willing to say to Princess Margaret, the other best line of the whole thing.
That was the best part of the whole movie.
Only queens. And then George Cukor's face. And and the woman who played Princess Margaret, tiny little scene, but look, if Judi Dench can get nominated for Queen Elizabeth, that woman should have been nominated for Princess Margaret. That was hilarious.
I mean, I think David was part of the movie so that you could see the juxtaposition of James at that time in the industry and David at that time in the industry, where it actually had started to change and you had to keep your private life private and not talk about it anymore.
Well, and what you learned, Matt, is that if David and James Whale are buried side by side, I mean, clearly this was somebody in his life that you had to include in a movie about his last 2 weeks, even though we know that Clayton Boone is fictional. We know that a lot of this stuff probably didn't happen, and it was all kind of in the mind of this novelist. This was not a docudrama by any means. But he was an important part of his life. So you had to make some room for him, but he was kind of a mystery too. But a mystery in a good way. Like, I was okay not being able to fill in all the blanks about David in a way that I was not okay not being able to fill in all the blanks about Clay.
Well, because I think you got a good sense of David's personality, David's motivation, even in those 2 tiny scenes that we saw where it was much more ambiguous.
I didn't understand the relationship, but David always made sense.
Correct.
Yeah. I feel his character was the one that, was based off of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. What's his name? Played it. Shoot.
Michael Caine?
Michael Caine played. I mean, I got the same kind of physical presence and the same kind of attitude from him that Michael Caine gave us in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels in that movie. That's what the minute David came on screen, that's what I was thinking the entire time.
No, when he first showed up on screen, I thought he was his friend. And then all of a sudden he kisses him. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is something different. And then you see him at the party. And again, that was like private David versus public David. And the whole thing was just kind of sad. And I was like, again, it was more sad if James was in love with this man, or is he just lonely? Because those are 2 different things.
I think he was still in love with him. I don't believe, from what I read, I don't believe it was, well, they broke up, and they broke up because James refused to hide, and he would not hide. So David, I mean, that's why the relationship ended. I don't know which one ended.
Did he just move out? Because that's also 2 different things, right? I mean, if they're still a couple in their mind, but they're not going to have the appearances as a couple, and David's going to live, 3 blocks away, I couldn't tell.
I'd have to investigate that, but from the sense that he was never really in the movie, except for the first scene, and then we run into him again at the party. I don't think that they were acting as a couple anymore. I think it was either too dangerous for David's career, and so he decided.
James introduce himself to Princess Margaret and George as David Lewis's friend? Did he say ex-friend? I don't remember. But it just, the whole thing was just a little mysterious. It just, which was cool. Like, I liked the mystery. That was fine. But it was an interesting little, dollop of mystery in this movie.
If he did, though, that was also because at the time he thought David had invited him. He didn't realize it was the other character until the other character accosted him.
Yeah.
So,
which we'll get to him.
We'll get to him. Next up is Lolita Davidovich as Betty.
She was a big deal in the 90s. Lolita Davidovich had made some really big movies. And she fucking disappeared. Like, whatever happened to her? She made that movie Blaze with Paul Newman, who was a politician who fell in love with a stripper, and she was the titular character, Matt, in Blaze star. And then she was in this movie Intersection. She was above the title with Richard Gere and Sharon Stone. It was the 2 of them and Lolita Davidovich in Intersection. I mean, she was a big thing, and then she just was in this tiny little role in Gods and Monsters, and I feel like she just fell off the radar. I didn't look at her credits to see if she's still working.
She's done a lot of TV.
Okay.
She moved to the small screen.
I'm on her Wikipedia page right now, and yes, she was in the original L Word. Go Lolita. And then she did a lot of CSI.
I don't remember that.
NCIS. Also, the Wikipedia has the description of the L Word as the first season of the Showtime lesbian-themed drama series. It sounds so clinical.
Not inaccurate, but yes.
Yeah. She was in True Detective, the second season, which is the lousy season. So she's done some things, but
she's working. Okay, good for you, Lolita. I just, I always liked her.
Booked and busy.
Awesome.
Yeah. But yes.
Yeah,
she has that face though, and her voice is very recognizable to me. I wouldn't, if you would, I thought she was Marky Post for a hot second. I was like, is that Marky Post?
Too.
Yes, right? She kind of has that, I was like, is that Marky Post? And then I was like, well, no, I didn't see her name in the credits. Not Marky Post. But she kind of has that same look and sound about her.
I thought that Betty was interesting too. I mean, it was just kind of this, you know, the one thing that you saw about maybe a woman in Clay's life, but clearly not. And I love the fact that she got the last word because Clay was being a real dick to her.
Well, and she was a great way for us to get a better understanding of Clay's personality and where he was in life. I mean, because otherwise we only get it from his perspective as he's telling Ian, or as he's telling James about his life, but her showing, you know, what kind of a piece of crap he is. Yeah. I mean, that was a really good
and another little touch that I loved is that she thought The Bride of Frankenstein was funny, and so does James Whale.
Yes!
Was like, did anyone laugh? And he was like, no, nobody laughed. And yes, she was totally laughing, and she was like, scary is scary and funny is funny, and this is funny. You know, and she was very clear about it. And so she actually watched the movie in a way that would have pleased James Whale more than Clay, who was trying to take it all seriously, like this is some kind of profound work of art.
Well, I mean, I think that's also a good indication that the character Clay just doesn't get life yet. He hasn't become an adult.
And maybe never will. And maybe he's just not of the thing's going to be clued in. I don't know. Some people are just dumb.
Fair.
So
I sound like Judge Judy. Can't fix stupid. Judge Judy sounds and looks almost exactly and acts almost exactly like my grandmother. And I say that with affection. Yeah. My grandmother is very much that that very hardcore New York Jew. It's amazing.
Well, I'm putting Judge Judy and Notorious RBG together for a moment, but it struck me. If we ever made a YouTube channel around the Rewind Project, every time Allie didn't like a movie, she should show up with a dissent collar.
Yes, I do have a little dissent collar pin. So yes.
Very subtle nod. Did you enjoy this one, folks?
No. I dissent.
Last up in the cast list, Jack Plotnick as Edmund K.
Who Matt and I will always know Jack Plotnick as the indomitable Evie Harris from Girls Will Be Girls. So funny.
How do I know him now? I definitely don't know him from that, but how do I know him? I need to look this up.
He's been around. He's done a bunch of different stuff, but I think he's always been a smaller roles in things. I don't want to say bit actor. That seems diminishing.
There are no small parts, only small actors, Matt.
But I loved his character. I don't know how much Jack Plotnick was acting as himself. I couldn't really ever tell if he was gay or not. They implied that he might have been.
He was completely gay. Are you blind?
$3 bill.
Oh my God, Matthew.
Jesus Christ.
Man, I'm not trying to succumb to stereotypes here. He could have been a straight man. That was just,
I dissent. No.
Shit, I'm not even gay, and I know. I mean, come on. Like, no, I don't want to generalize, but like, that's why he was. That's why James Whale was like.
I mean,
yeah, that's why James Whale was like fucking foaming at the mouth. He was like, "Oh, a live one here," like.
Yeah, he didn't ask Clay to do a striptease for him. He asked Edmund K to do this. And so that, yes, he was absolutely gay. And kind of getting off on the fact that this older gay, film director wanted to see him naked. I mean, he was enjoying it. It was, yes, 100%.
So the character himself, though, too, was super fucking annoying.
So annoying. Not because he's gay. Not because he's gay. Just because he's annoying. I just want to lay. I just want to lay that out
there. It was more of a commentary on fanboys, I think, than anything else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and then his machination, at the thing to get the cast members together, and I didn't sense that they hated each other, but they're also trotting out in front of the camera again. It's like, let them just be at the fucking garden party and have some martinis or whatever, let them live.
I don't know. I mean, I looked at that and I was like, in a way, he didn't know the history, but in a way that was actually kind of sweet. I mean, I brought you here so you could, get a picture with some of your old friends. I mean, he didn't know that the guy was like, I mean, he did see him have a stroke, so he might have thought, he's not the most, but he seemed to be fine. I mean, that didn't bother me. That was just kind of one of those, little mini tragedies. It's like, oh, this doesn't mean what this young kid thought it meant, But, Edmund K. is trying to get ahead. I mean, now he's George Cukor's social secretary. He wants James Whale to be his friend.
Right.
I think he's still trying to get ahead, and he's trying to do nice things, but he doesn't have the social skills, and he's not very observant because he's kind of annoying.
I mean, he kind of invented the convention right there. I mean, they could have started doing horror conventions and just started having people start sign stuff.
Right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's what that scene was.
And I want to know if that picture of Boris Karloff and Elsa Lancaster and James Whale exists. I hope it does.
I hope so.
I have to do a deep dive later.
I mean, I just say that's actually kind of cool. I thought it was interesting, though, that they cast someone as Elsa, but then they actually used the real footage from The Bride of Frankenstein, like just moments before. So that we actually saw two Elsas. We saw the real one, and then we saw the actress in color in the big wig. She was fine. She looked close enough.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I'm glad they used the original footage of the movie, and then I think the actors that they got to supplant the roles were actually good, and it felt believable, that scene afterwards. They looked enough. Plus the movie, I mean, is grainy enough because of when it was actually filmed.
Yeah,
that it kind
and
of
that other scene was in color. And then when you saw her at the garden party, she was very aged. And of course, Boris Karloff looked very different out of his monster makeup than he ever did, on the set of Frankenstein. So fine.
Not a Frankenstein stan. Is this a safe place to say that?
Yeah. We don't have to like everything.
Well, we all know that that's true. That's never stopped me before.
So as we've been talking about this movie, and we've been talking about, being honest and authentic in your life, whereas James Whale seemed to be, it's interesting that he was open, or at least to me, it was interesting that he was open about his sexuality, but not about his past.
Especially the fact that he was poor. Yeah, that was really interesting to me too.
I feel that some of that is of the time, of the Victorian time. You didn't, and especially in England. I don't say that I'm an expert in England, but like I'm kind of an Anglophile, and the class system in England is much more brutal than it ever is in America, and it's there's definitely like different levels of poor, and he sort of alludes to that in the movie, and so I sort of get from his age and his upbringing like where like that is coming from. But you're right, it is an interesting choice that like I wanted to learn a little bit more about his like relationship with his poor father, who was just a coal miner or worked in a factory. And, obviously he hated him, but did he hate him because he wasn't supportive? Did he hate him because he couldn't provide for his family? Did he hate, so like I wanted to know a little bit more about those machinations, like, and like how that shaped him.
The one line we got from the father was, straighten up, everyone's going to think you're a Nancy boy, which pretty much told me everything I needed to know. It's not a movie about the elder Mr. Whale. I mean, that was...
No, I thought that was his grandfather, who was a minister, because he was much older in that flashback. And then he had like the young guy with like the coal or dirt on his face was his dad.
Oh, I thought it was the same person.
Oh, I mean, I know he had a shitty relationship with his whole family. So, but no, I thought that was his grandfather, but I'd have to go back and look at it.
It's interesting that you say that, though, that, the whole caste system kind of that was apparent in England at the time, like, you had a station essentially, because when he gets to America, he doesn't go back to England ever. So I did read that he lives in California, and it seems like he never moved back. He didn't really want to visit. And from according to this movie, I mean, even when he meets Princess Margaret, really kind of says that he wants nothing to do with those people. And I think that meant all of England, but he still puts on airs and hides what his background was, as if he's trying to show them that I'm much better than I was before, and hides the facts. So it's interesting to me, like,
in America, it's cool to have poor beginnings and work yourself into a place of success.
Yeah, rags to riches.
That shows character. In Britain, that's not cool. Like, once you're poor, you're always, you know, that person, right? And so it's not a cool thing there to kind of work yourself through the ranks and kind of, you know, because of your merit and hard work and blah, blah, blah. That's a very American kind of success story. So even though, I mean, I think he likes it in America because no one asks him all the time, did you grow up poor? But he's still British to the core and is not going to give that information up because it's just not anything that works in his favor in his own mind.
I guess, but I kind of feel like as he's built his life here and he's kind of shunning England, why not just embrace who you were and show, I mean, with all the new people that you've met here in America and just kind of truly become American and be like, I've raised myself up. So he still is very English by the end of the, by the end of the movie, even if he's
you know, nothing serious, touch of stroke. I mean, that's the most English thing in that, you know, and I think it does kind of go back to what I was saying before is that, yeah, he was really open about his sexuality because he was a young man in an era where nobody cared. I think that if he had been surrounded by homophobia, he would not be the big ol' queen that you see at the end of the film. You know, he wasn't that brave. And I don't think he was, you know, ever brave enough to be open with many people about his meager beginnings in poverty.
I know. I found the juxtaposition interesting because generally our movies that go about gay people are about them hiding themselves and not.
And that's the thing that I loved about this movie the most is that he did suffer, but he didn't suffer because he was gay, not one bit. Like he had no hang-ups about that whatsoever, and that was refreshing.
Well, it's interesting, too, that he doesn't share that because a lot of these, even in Hollywood, a lot of the people lived through the Great Depression, lived through the Dust Bowl era, lived through a war, and probably have a lot in common with, you know, coming from meager beginnings. I could pinpoint a million movie stars who started in a small town, you know, where their dad was whatever, you know. So it's a shame because he probably would have had a lot in common with the people that he worked with just from that. But
that's also a very British kind of keep calm and carry on. Sure. Like, don't complain, you know.
No, of course. I'm just saying if he was a different kind of person, like he could have discovered. He had a lot more in common than he thought he did.
And I think if James Whale was American, we'd be having a very different conversation. He would have been very open about it.
True. Do you think he would have been open about his homosexuality?
Sure, if he was making films at that time and Rock Hudson was having naked pool parties every weekend, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think the thing is that we look at somebody like him and say, oh my gosh, he was so brave and so ahead of his time to be out. He was absolutely a product of his time. We swung backwards in a big way in the 50s and 60s. And that's why we now look at people who were out, you know, kind of from the past and go, oh my gosh, like that was so amazing of them. It was not that amazing in Hollywood at that time. It really wasn't. I mean, it was just people living their lives. Now, you did have to worry about what the rest of the world thought of you. And it was one of the reasons why he said, you know what, I made my money. I did well. I'm out. Because I don't want to hide anymore. Right. As the world began to change, David was like, no, I still want to work. And so that was where the two of them kind of grew apart.
Okay. Are you guys ready for some fun facts?
How fun are they, is my question.
Actually, not really. They're more interesting facts.
That's okay. It's not been the most fun episode.
Oh, I'm looking at these fun facts now. You're about to spill some big old tea. No, this is going to be fun.
No. And some of them aren't actually necessarily about the movie. They more about the characters the movie is about.
Yep. Even better.
First off, there are 5 original James Whale drawings actually in the movie. He was a very artistic person and did a lot of drawing after his career kind of took a dump in directing. He did produce some plays and stuff, went back there, and then started drawing nudes of men and women. So there 5 of them were actually in the movie. They were lent out from a collection.
That's awesome. And can I tell you how mad I was at the end of the movie? And I was like, why isn't that picture in a frame? Why isn't it like away from your grubby son? Like that's probably worth a shit ton of money. And he was like folding it up and putting it in his pocket. I was like, it's going to rain on it. I got very angry.
I mean, Clayton was not the most intelligent of people.
I was like, that's like precious fucking cargo. Like, you need to like put that up in your like safe deposit box or like put it in a frame on the top shelf. Anyway, that's just me.
No, I totally agree. I mean, that's probably his retirement plan.
Right.
This movie was actually shot in 24 days.
That amazes me.
That's insane. That's quite a punishing schedule.
I mean, it wasn't a whole lot of, a big scenery and setup except for like the garden party and stuff. It was mostly intimate conversations between people, so I can understand kind of how they did it, but it's still freaking amazing that they were able to do it in 24 days.
A lot.
Less than a month.
That's nuts.
It's also a movie without, very many special effects. And so it's kind of like, I mean, when I think about it, I'm like, why should this movie have taken more than 24 days? It was mostly 3 actors. It was mostly one set. Like, that's cool, but it's still kind of like, wow, it was really good. And they made it in less than a month.
Yeah.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah. It can be done. Next up, some tea. Okay.
Spill it.
So Karloff and James Whale maintained a secret dalliance, which spawned 3 hit movies until Karloff could no longer tolerate Whale's cruel, punishing games.
That tracks.
And they broke up their relationship during the filming of The Old Dark House. So Karloff was slated to appear in the title role of The Invisible Man, or the titular role, sorry. But Whale replaced him with Claude Rains.
Good
the
choice.
two never spoke
Honestly,
again.
Like, Claude Rains is probably better for that movie, so okay.
But they reunited for The Bride of Frankenstein, which came after, and due to contractual obligations, Whale would categorically refuse ever to work with Karloff again. And so he was replaced as director for Son of Frankenstein.
Also
Hacks.
tracks.
Those other movies were made by hacks.
all of this is not, none of this is surprising. But good.
I didn't know that about Boris Karloff. I didn't know Boris Karloff, played for the other side ever.
Well, and he might have played for both teams.
He might have.
We always like to think binary.
I didn't say anything binary, but I said I didn't know that Karloff played around with boys ever. That's amazing. I know he was with women. I mean, he was married and he had kids, I believe. But that's wow. Cool. Today I learned. I love it.
The more you know. So next up, do you guys want to play a game?
What if I was like, no?
Well, today's is Get to Know Your Gods or Monsters. What celebrity would you like to see a biopic of? And it could be a miniseries. You can do however you want. What part of their life interests you the most? And then who plays the titular character?
There it is again.
And who directs? And let's see. Eric, you go first.
Okay. So my biopic is someone that I don't know a lot about, but I did see a really fascinating YouTube video about her recently. Be Kind Rewind is our little tagline, but it's also a great YouTube channel for little mini documentaries about old Hollywood, and I love it. So, go watch her stuff. She did a video about a year ago called Why Tallulah Bankhead Was Never a Movie Star. And I watched it, and it was an hour long, and Tallulah Bankhead is a fascinating person. And I would love to see a movie about her. She was a huge Broadway star at the time. Big star. I mean, everyone knew who Tallulah Bankhead was. She was infamous, but she never made a lot of movies. So we don't have kind of a lot to look back on in terms of her career and her life. But she was big and brash and wild and incredibly talented. And also, according to a lot of people in my life, big old lesbian. And they're like, every time I talk about anybody on, from the golden age, Faye is always like, oh, Tallulah slept with her. Oh, Tallulah slept with her too. Yep, Tallulah was with her. So would love to, see something in the 21st century that could get into that part of her life as well. I, as a casting choice, I actually reached out to my Rewind Project colleague, Allie Jenkins, on this one, who said, oh, raspy voice, Natasha Lyonne, absolutely. And I'm like, yes, because you need the voice. The one thing that Tallulah was known for, she was on the radio a lot. Everybody knew her voice, and it was this very, very raspy. Now, Natasha's going to have to calm down that mop of curls on top of her head, because Tallulah had a very different look, but I think she could do it. And I think that Natasha also has that what's she gonna say next kind of quality that Tallulah was also very much known for, and she can throw some shade, Natasha, and that's what Tallulah would do as well. I thought for this, I would really want a woman to direct this. It just seems that I don't know. I was so unhappy with the way that I heard Andrew Dominik directed Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe movie that I refused to see. I don't think that, I think I trust women more to direct a movie about a scandalous woman, right? I wouldn't want to dip too far into the scandal stuff. I would want to see if I could figure out who this person really is. And my old saw about biopics that I absolutely believe in is that you get much more about a character if you tell the story of a week in their life than if you try to hit every single life milestone and try to squeeze it into a 2-hour film. So for my director, I always go to Greta Gerwig when I want a woman. She's like the avatar for me of women directors. So this time I said, what about Sarah Polley? Sarah Polley just directed Women Talking, which is a Best Picture nominee. Of course, she did not get nominated for Best Director, of course, because Oscar has a huge problem nominating women in that category. But she's a wonderful director, and she works really well with actresses. Women Talking is almost an all-female cast. Julie Christie was in Away From Her when Julie was towards the end of her career, and Sarah was towards the beginning of her directing career. Sarah Polley is also an actor, and so I think it would be really cool to see what she would do with an actor's life story. So that's my game. Natasha Lyonne is Tallulah Bankhead. I would watch the hell out of that.
Hell yeah. I don't know anything about Tallulah Bankhead. So yeah, I'm into it.
Neither do I.
I'm into it.
Okay, Allie, you're up next.
All right. So as usual, I went in a totally opposite direction. I guess this person would be considered a celebrity. I didn't really take that into account, but I've always kind of been obsessed with this person. And my celebrity, quote unquote, that I want to see, I say biopic, but I guess it's biopic, that I would want to see a movie about, and it's a specific part of his life, is Mark Twain. I don't know. I'm like fascinated with Mark Twain. I find him
celebrity. Sure.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
it doesn't have to be like a movie star or something. It could be anybody famous.
Okay. Yeah. So Mark Twain, I find him irascible. I find him very fascinating. Like he has a lot of quips that are like some of my favorite sayings. And so he spent 6 months or so in DC writing for newspapers as like their Washington correspondent. And he famously like hated DC, a lot of his famous quotes are from that time. Like, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. Like, Washington DC is a city with Southern hospitality and Northern whatever, so it's like a lot of his quotes are like, he like hated being in DC, but also like kind of found it fascinating, which I think a lot of us can relate to. So, it would be that time period. And also I love a DC story always and forever. And, some of the places that he went to, like the Willard Hotel, they all still exist, obviously in a 2023 way, but like I think you could do a lot with it. And, really, I didn't even have to think about this. This person just sort of popped up, and he's played sort of these sort of figures with gravitas on Broadway before. But I would put Bryan Cranston as my Mark Twain.
Yes.
Oh, love that.
Yeah. It just sort of like, it was like a fever dream. It just popped into my head. And I feel like, because he's funny, but he has like that sort of like, I feel like he could be really sarcastic and just like really imbue that character. And directs, I'm bringing him out of mothballs, but this is an Oliver Stone joint for sure. Nobody loves American history more than him. And I feel, again, if I wanted to do it in sort of like a documentary style, these 6 months of Mark Twain's life in DC, like he's going to be the guy. So that's my god or monster. And, to some people, Mark Twain was a god, and some people hated him on sight. So I think it would be really interesting. And I feel like there's just not a lot of, you can read his books and stuff, but I like to read the commentary about Mark Twain. I find it so fascinating. That's my nerd. I'm nerding out today.
That sounds really interesting. So mine is completely different than both of yours. So I pulled out my nerd card, and I want my movie to be about Gene Roddenberry. So I know very little about him.
Shocked.
I mean, for the person that created, I don't know, for me, what could be, mankind's future of what we could actually ascend to if we could get past ourselves. I have a lot of respect for the vision that is Star Trek and what Star Trek has come to represent for a lot of people. And so I really would like to get to know a little bit more about the man behind that and what is, and his thoughts. And I would focus it on that 1968 interracial kiss between Uhura and Kirk on set. There was a lot of, shall we say, caution by the network at that time because of it. I mean, there had been very few interracial kisses. Most of them were between, Caucasian and people of Asian or South Asian. So,
okay, you say caution, I say chicken shit, but tomato. Go ahead. They
were very concerned about doing this. After the kiss, they got one piece of mail that was kind of detracting. It was more like this guy was like, I don't really approve of it, but if a captain, I think it was something like, if a captain like Kirk is put in a room with a woman as attractive as Uhura, of course they're going to kiss. You know what I mean? So it was like they actually got no real bad mail from it. And so I think it's actually kind of an uplifting story in a time that there was still a lot of racial tension. My Gene Roddenberry would be played by Brendan Fraser. I actually think he's about the right age for the right time that this was going on. So I'm going to join that, the Brendan Sans. And then I would actually have it directed by Regina King. I mean, we're dealing with race. I think that actually has to be part of this story. And it was, he was somebody that was forward thinking and pushed it into the show. And this was not the first in the show. This was just the first between an African-American woman and a Caucasian man. So it's an interesting, little piece of history for me.
And that woman who played Mamie Till in the movie Till, who should have been nominated for an Oscar but wasn't, she's got to be your Uhura. She'd be perfect.
Ooh, that's great. I love that. That would be fantastic. So that would be my movie.
I would watch all of these. Hollywood, what is wrong with you? Call us. Please.
Seriously, God. We're so good at this.
So next up is skip, rent, or buy. Skip, I mean, what a waste of celluloid. Rent, it was worth the afternoon. And then buy, I got to be in my library. I'll watch it several times. So let's go in reverse order. Allie, you're up first.
I'm a skippity skip, dip, dip to dip, do up to dooby doo. I mean, if I just wanted to see McKellen being charming and witty, I would just see his many appearances on the Graham Norton show. I would just go on YouTube and search Ian McKellen. If I wanted to see Lynn Redgrave being the queen she is, same thing. I would watch all of the other movies that they are in. I was going strong for like the first 25 minutes of this movie, and then the phone came out and I was like, I kept stopping and starting and stopping and starting, and I had dinner and then I stopped and then I started, and it did not hold my interest one bit. So yeah, skippity dip.
Okay. Eric?
I am a real solid rent on this one. I did have some problems with this movie, mostly that I didn't understand who Clay Boone was supposed to be at all. And I get that he's like the totally fictional character and James Whale is the real character, and maybe both the original author and the screenwriter were way more interested in James Whale than they were in Clay Boone. But I feel like this is the story of a friendship, as Ali said, and both of these people need to make sense. I didn't thought the very final frame of this movie, when all of a sudden Brendan Fraser's in the rain and starts doing the Frankenstein walk, I'm like, why is he doing that? I don't know what this means. But I'm a sucker for good performances, and Ian McKellen and Lynn Redgrave are perfection in this movie. They're so good that they made me happy that I saw it, but I don't think I would buy this one. And I think that if, again, to Allie's point, if somebody said, you know, oh, I'm in the mood for some Ian McKellen, I mean, I'd pull out X-Men before I probably. He's brilliant in X-Men. Like his Magneto is fantastic. It's as good, I think, as his James Whale. So, and you know, plus you get to see, you know, another hot guy in a tank top, Hugh Jackman, who also fills it out quite nicely. So, yeah, I'm a rent on this one. I'm glad I saw it. I don't think I'm going to pull it up again real soon.
Okay. I am an actual buy. I went back and bought it after I rented it. For me, I feel I enjoy the story. It's nice to know that there was somebody out there living their life from our community that was, you know, and didn't feel like they had to hide it. I also felt like that Clayton was James Wales's monster. I felt that, you know, James Wales in this was actually Frankenstein creating his monster and creating that other tool. And that's why I feel at the end of the movie, that's, you know, that last scene with Brendan Fraser is him walking away. I mean, he kind of felt like he had been molded as well to fill a specific role. So that's kind of where I felt that was going. So I don't know that it was supposed to be a friendship as it was supposed to be a different type of relationship. But for me, I really enjoyed this movie. I went back and bought it. So, okay, 3 completely different takes. I don't know how often that happens.
It doesn't happen very often, but I love it when we have a skip, a rent, and a buy on the same show. I truly do. I love that.
Well, please join us again next week when we will be talking about Pleasantville.
Another movie I've not seen before.
It's another one that hopefully I will enjoy it as much this time around as I did in the theater. I've not seen it
in 25 years. I pitched this one, so I'm hoping it's as good as I recall. I'm just excited to see young Tobey Maguire, young Reese Witherspoon, and also an amazing cast. I mean, William H. Macy, Joan Allen, Jeff Daniels. Fantastic cast, and I remember it being great. So, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Well, hopefully you would join us again. This has been the Rewind Project. I'm Matt.
I'm Allie.
I'm Eric.
Be kind. Rewind. Even to see that titular character.
You've been listening to the Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
Who plays the titular character? I knew you were going to ask that.